The fog between hands. The meeting ends with 5 approvals, 2 dashboards updated, and a checklist marked complete. Yet the problem remains, and nobody can name who owned the decision. Notifications multiply, but accountability gets thinner. In distributed systems, responsibility dissolves when decisions are broken into many compliance steps, because the system rewards proof of process more reliably than proof of outcomes. Coordination is designed for moving work across many hands without constant negotiation. To do that, it installs constraints: gates, templates, roles, service levels, tickets, scorecards. These constraints reduce variance and make work legible, but they also relocate judgment. Consider process following. A workflow says submit a request, attach evidence, get 2 sign-offs, log the change, close the item. Each step is measurable, auditable, and repeatable. The explicit constraint is that no individual is allowed to act outside the defined path, even when local context is clear. The trade-off is predictable throughput versus situated judgment. The system gains consistency and loses adaptability. Now add the incentive structure. People are evaluated on what can be counted: number of items closed, compliance rate, response time, completion of required fields, absence of escalations. These metrics become proxies. Proxies are not neutral. They encode what the system can see. If the system can see checkboxes but cannot see downstream harm, then the system will preferentially reward checkbox completion. A feedback loop forms. What is rewarded becomes what is emphasized. What is emphasized becomes what is reported. What is reported becomes what leadership believes. What leadership believes becomes what is rewarded. Model following is the newer cousin. Instead of a checklist, a model scores risk, predicts impact, assigns priority, or recommends a next action. It is attractive because it appears to reduce bias and increase speed, yet it introduces a different constraint. The decision must be justifiable in the model's language, features, thresholds, categories, even when reality does not fit cleanly. The trade-off shifts: speed and apparent objectivity versus accountability and interpretability. When a model is used, responsibility can dissolve in 2 directions. If the model's recommendation is followed, any negative outcome is blamed on the system. If the recommendation is overridden, the overrider becomes exposed, because deviation is legible while quiet conformity is often invisible. This creates an incentive to conform to the model, not because it is always correct, but because it is safer under scrutiny. The system behaves as designed. It makes deviations costly and compliance cheap. Diffusion also emerges through handoffs. Each hand is assigned a narrow scope. One person collects requirements, another reviews, another approves, another executes, another monitors. Each role is constrained to my part, and the interfaces between parts are treated as boundaries of responsibility. But outcomes ignore boundaries. When a failure occurs, the postmortem often traces the chain and finds that everyone followed procedure and acted on the available information. Both statements can be true, and still the system can be wrong. This is the foggy boundary of accountability, a space where responsibility is present in aggregate, but absent in any single place. Coordination reduces conflict by distributing decisions. It also distributes ownership, until it becomes difficult to locate. The more the system relies on process evidence and model scores, the more it can produce a transcript of activity without producing a bearer of judgment. This mechanism reveals a value choice. When a system optimizes for legibility, dashboards, approvals, audit trails, it often does so by converting moral and practical responsibility into administrative artifacts. Attention is pulled toward what is easy to defend: the ticket number, the timestamp, the policy citation, the risk score. Meaning is pulled away from what is harder to defend: the lived consequence, the edge case, the quiet degradation. In such environments, responsibility is not usually rejected. It is displaced. People still care, but their attention is trained by incentives to care in narrower ways. They learn that the system listens to compliance signals, so they speak in compliance signals. They learn that outcomes are complex and delayed, so they invest in immediate proof. Over time, identity can shift from "I own the result" to "I did my part." This is not a character flaw. It is a second-order effect of coordination, optimized for measurement. Accountability then becomes performative, an exercise in locating the correct artifact rather than clarifying the real decision. The cost is not only operational, it is also a loss of agency. When no one can name the decision and the decider, the organization cannot truly learn. because learning requires a clear linkage between judgment and consequence. Consider a recent moment when a decision felt unavoidable because the process or the model said so. Notice what could be named precisely: steps completed, approvals obtained, fields filled, and what remained unnamed. Who was permitted to say this should not proceed? What evidence would have changed the course? What outcome was being protected? Examine the boundary. Where did responsibility become a handoff? Name the proxy that stood in for judgment. Name the incentive that made compliance feel safer than clarity. This is not a search for blame. It is a search for the point where the system converted a decision into a sequence. When many hands touch a decision, ownership does not vanish by accident. It vanishes where proof of process replaces proof of care.